Egypt was now completely subdued by the Turks, but Selim remained there some months, engaged in settling the future government of the new empire which he had acquired, and in visiting the public buildings of its capital. The mysterious monuments of the pharaohs and the relics of the splendors of the Ptolemies had no interest for the Ottoman Sultan. He did not even visit the pyramids, but all his attention was concentrated on the mosques and other religious foundations of the early Mohammedan sovereigns of Egypt. He attended divine worship in the chief mosques of Cairo on the first Friday after his conquest, and gave to the assembled people an impressive example of religious humility and contrition, by causing the rich carpets which had been spread for him to be removed, and by prostrating himself with his bare forehead on the bare pavement, which he visibly moistened with his tears. It is throwing no slur on the Mohammedan religion to believe in the sincerity of Selim's devotion. Thus, at this very time, the most cruel exactions were practiced on the people of Egypt by his orders. Christendom could, during that century, show many a crowned tyrant as earnest in bigotry, and as barbarous and unprincipled towards his fellow creatures as Sultan Selim. Some of his principal followers imitated their master in oppression and rapacity, but there were also nobler and more generous spirits among the Ottoman chiefs. The historian Idris had been already mentioned with honor for the justice and skill with which he organized the administrative system of Diyarbakir and Kurdistan, when set over those newly conquered countries by Selim. He had subsequently attended the Sultan during the Egyptian campaign, and he now risked his life by interceding with his savage master in behalf of the oppressed natives. He had been commissioned by Selim to translate from the Arabic the work of Demiri on natural history, and he added to this translation a short poem which he wrote in Persian, and in which he gave the Sultan severe and salutary advice about the administration of Egypt. The Ottoman viziers, in whose hands he placed his book, according to the court ceremonial for presentation to the Sultan, dreaded his wrath on receiving such free-spoken counsel, and they offered Idris 1,000 ducats if he would take his poem for advice back and suffer the trees on natural history, to be laid before the royal master without it. Idris refused the money and insisted on his treatise and poem being presented to the Sultan, threatening the viziers that unless they did their duty he would himself bring his writings to Selim's notice and inform him of the negligence of his court officers. Thus threatened, the viziers were obliged to comply, and Idris had the noble daring to subjoin to his poem a letter in which he requested the Sultan's permission to leave Egypt unless the misery and misgovernment which he saw in all directions there were remedied. The heat of Selim's best generals would have fallen for half this boldness, but Selim's admiration for literary merit was strong and sincere, and he only showed the mortification which he experienced from Idris' rebuke by sending the high-minded historian to Constantinople by the Turkish fleet, which at Selim's orders had sailed to the harbor of Alexandria, and which on its return menaced but did not attack the island of Rhodos. Another literary favorite of Selim, Kemal Paşazade, who held the high legal station of Kadiasker of Anatolia, ventured with impunity about the same time to bring to the knowledge of the Sultan the discontent that was gathering among the ranks of the army of their prolonged detention in Egypt. This cautioned, Selim abandoned the projects which, like Camby's, he had formed of conquering the countries beyond the cataracts of the Nile, and prepared for his march back to Europe. He had respected the persons of his literary rowers, and he abstained, as was his custom, from punishing the common soldiery for their opposition to his wishes, but he vented his wrath on his viziers and other high officers at every opportunity. The Grand Vizier Yunus Pasha was one of his victims. As he rode with Selim on the march back to Syria, Selim said to him, "Well, our backs are now turned on Egypt, and we shall soon see Gaza." Yunus Pasha, who had always opposed the Egyptian expedition, answered hastily, "And what has been the result of all our trouble and anxiety, except that we have left half our army on the battlefield or in the sands of the desert, and have set up a gang of traitors as chiefs of Egypt?" Selim instantly bade his guards put Yunus to death, and the Grand Vizier's head was struck off as he sat on horseback by the Sultan's side. The mode of administering the government of Egypt was a subject of deep anxiety to Selim, as it had been to all former conquerors of that wealthy and powerful country. The Persian kings of Roman emperors and the Syrian caliphs had ever found good cause to dread that their Egyptian province would assert its independence. He would not sow in a virgin soil the seeds of independence, which he was intent upon crushing nearer home. Egypt, with the sea in its front and a desert on either hand, was difficult to access to the Roman armies. Its overflowing stores of grain might give it the command of the Italian markets, and its accumulated treasures by the swords of mercenary legions. Octavius made it his own. He appointed a favorite officer, Cornelius Gallus, whose humble rank as a knight as well as his tried services seemed to ensure his fidelity to govern it. In due time, he persuaded the Senate and people to establish it as a principle that Egypt should never be placed under the administration of any man of superior rank of the equestrian, and that no senator should be allowed even to visit it without express permission from the supreme authority. For the defense of this cherished province, Octavius allotted 3 legions, besides some squadrons of cavalry, and a body of 9 cohorts of pure Roman extraction. 1 legion was quartered in Alexandria, the inhabitants of which, though turbulent, were incapable of steady resistance. A division of 3 cohorts garrisoned Thane on the Nubian frontier, and others were stationed in various localities. Under, under the military commander was a revenue officer, whose accounts were delivered to Octavius himself, by whom he was directly appointed. Merivale's History of the Romans under the Empire. See also the observations of Napoleon on Egypt, Mottola's Memories. An ambitious pasha, if of daring genius and favorite of circumstances, might have raised up against the Ottomans the Arabian nation of which Egypt, according to its last greater conqueror Napoleon. In the natural metropolis, Selim even feared that the division of Egypt into several pashaliks would not be sufficient guarantee for the subjection of the part, and he therefore resolved to divide authority among the variety of races in the country, and so to secure his imperial sovereignty, he did not extirpate the Mamluks, nor did he provide for their gradual extension by forbidding the Beys to recruit their households with new slaves from Circassia. 24 Beys of the Mamluks chosen from those who had acted with the invaders continued to preside over the departments of the province, and their chief, the arch-traitor Khair Bey, was styled governor of Egypt. Selim, however, sent Khair Bey's wives and children to Europe as securities for his good behavior. He formed a more effectual and lasting safeguard for the Turkish supremacy by placing a permanent force of 5,000 spies and 500 Janissaries in the capital under the command of the Ottoman Aga Hayreddin, who had orders never to leave the fortifications. This force was recruited from among the inhabitants of Egypt and formed gradually a provincial militia with high privileges and importance. Selim placed the greater part of the administrative functions of law and religion in the hands of the Arab sheikhs, who possessed the greatest influence over the mass of the population, which, like themselves, was of Arabic origin. The sheikhs naturally attached themselves through religious spirit and inclination of Constantinople rather than to the Mamluks, and draw the feelings of the other Arab inhabitants with them. Selim took no heed of the Copts, the aboriginal natives of Egypt, but it was from among this despised class and the Jews that the Mamluk Bey generally selected their agents and tax gatherers, and the villages were commonly under the immediate government of Coptic local officers. The Mamluk sultans of Egypt, whose dynasties Selim cut short, had been the recognized suzerains and protectors of the holy city of Arabia, and Selim now acquired the same title and rights which were of infinite worth in the eyes of that imperial devotee, and which were and are of real practical value to an Ottoman sultan from the influence which they give him over the whole Mahometan world. Of Egypt, a general of a statement can consult. He seems to have almost prophesied the rising of Mehmet Ali against the Porte. There is a sketch of the history of Egypt under the Mamluks and under the Porte in the first volume of Hope's Anastasius, which the world consulting for other purposes than those of mere amusement. Another important dignity which the Sultan Selim and his successors obtained from the conquest of Egypt was the succession to the Caliphate, and the spiritual power and preeminence of the immediate vicars of Mahomet himself. After the death of the four first caliphs, who had been personal companions of the Prophet, the spiritual sovereignty of Islam passed successively to the Umayyad caliphs and to the Abbasids, whose temporal power was overthrown by Hulagu Khan, a grandson of Genghis Khan, in 1258. But though the substantial authority of the caliphs independent princess was then shattered. The name was perpetuated 3 centuries longer in 18 descendants of the House of Abbas, who dwelt in Egypt with titular pomp, but no real power in the capital of the Mamluk rulers. Like the descendants of the great Mughal in British India, they gave their names to the edicts of the Mamluk sultans when required, and we have seen in the case of the Ottoman Beyazid that Mahometan princes in other countries still regarded the Egyptian caliph as the fountain of honor, and sought from him the stamp and sanctions of sovereignty. When Selim conquered Egypt, he found there Muhammad, the 12th caliph of the family of Abbas, and he induced him solemnly to transfer the caliphate to the Ottoman Sultan and his successors. At the same time, Selim took possession of the visible insignia of that high office which the Abbasids had retained, the scarlet standard of sword and the mantle of the Prophet.